in my country, one politician said that war is so serious business, so it shouldn't be led by generals but politicians. So I agree with that, and that is the big difference. I'm going mainly to speak about my last mission. I see I have a good friend here in the audience, John. We were there together for more than 1 year. So he can probably have all the smart questions afterwards. It was all based on 2 Security Council resolutions. They are the same, renewal after 1 year, and ahead of that it was the Security Council Presidential Statement number 49 of 2006. Here is the whole mandate, and to my opinion we did the 3 upper points. And that was necessary to do number 4 and 5, arrange the elections, which in fact was a task for the Nepali people themselves. So to my opinion, this was a classical Chapter 6 operation, paragraph 32 to 38. It was monitoring with the consent of both parties. They even asked us to come in 2 like sounding letters. The only difference was the signature at the bottom from the 2 leaders. Legal base was good, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement and the Arms Monitoring Agreement. And it was the ownership to the conflict and solution of the conflict, which is a key word here, loaded on the parties. And we had integrated command that is called military operational control. So everybody is serving with me. I could give orders direct and supervise them, and there was no bypass. And I think both here and in the Nuba earlier, this was a very well functioning thing. There was something not covered by the admin mandate. On the top is the what you will call the ceasefire agreement. I negotiated that on behalf of the UN, as Mr. Martin was in New York, and then something made by the 2 parties, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. And there is key issues, and that was discharge and social reintegration on personnel that will not go into the security sector later, what I call a half-D DNR. The other thing was the amalgamation of the security forces to absorb those who were really qualified from the Maoist army to go into the army, police, armed police force, customs, border security, and so on, in scale 1 to 1. You have to select them 1 to 1 based on the criteria for that job. To send in whole blocks or whole units will be a failure. Remember that. Security sector reforms, as we tried to discuss this with the chief of the army staff in Nepal, he almost threw through the ceiling. So that was a non-mentionable sentence during his period. But the 2 upper was vaguely mentioned in the Comprehensive Peace Accord. It is a must, I think, when you establish a mission like this, to have the ownership of both parties to the conflict and the solution. And you, that goes in from the international community, has to be the link here, and the one who weld this together. And you have to use your whole sheet of music from the social thing, what you know about this from the background, and all these things. And let me just mention here that the underdog, or here the rebels, they have very low experience, knowledge on peacekeeping operations. Nepal army, no problem, they have been in there since 1959. So what we did was, in fact, to train all commanders of the Maoist army from divisional level and down to brigade level, telling them what this is all about. Otherwise, they will lose in all kind of discussions in the future. So this you owe to them. Do you have to involve them on conflict resolution on strategic, operational, tactical, technical levels? They have to be in there Don't let them go and leave this only to the internationals. They have asked us to come, I told them, and if you don't want this, I can go back again. But you need to help me on all these levels to make a solution here. And the other thing which was very fortunate in this mission, it didn't happen when I went to Nuba. I was in the group that negotiated the agreement I was to control. And then you know the meaning and you remember all the discussions behind any wording of that 12-page document. You remember that it took 24 hours to negotiate the 7 last words in that document and why it was so. And then you have already built the relations. In this case, those from the Nepal army and those from the Maoist army later become members of the Joint Monitoring Coordination Committee. Maoist army was spread all over. I won't talk too much about this, but they had a classical organization. They call them divisions, even if they are very small, but this is how it was. And the supreme commander and the leader of the Maoist party had his own headquarters in the middle of Kathmandu, where you can go freely, no problem. And the rest, the 7 divisions, was then spread. And this is a typical member of the Maoist army. 17.8% were females. They're even brigade commanders. And they were very well taken care of and respected within the ranks. You should also know this, that this is unity between the army, the party, and the United Front. So you will find this organization all the way through, down to the lowest military formation, which is a section, 7 men. And then you will find village committees and so on. They also had good discipline, to my opinion, and they had sense for traditions and style, so it's not a ragtag army. The Nepal army, a classical one, used to be under command of the king up till 2005, if I don't remember wrong, and every officer was personally appointed. But let me see, I know the Nepal army from South Lebanon early 90s, and I saw the difference when I was there 2 years ago. They have become much more professional. Of course, they have been trained by the Americans and the Brits and Israelis, and they have been restructured and retrained. They always been loyal to the UN system, become member of the United Nations in 1956, sent their first 3 monitors to South Lebanon in 1958, and they always been willing to go in with the first contingents in a lot of missions, especially in Africa. So they are something for the UN to rely on, and I think they are a good force. So what was this all about? To my opinion, the end state was for me to secure fair elections. We had the 2 main parties, the interim government of Nepal on the top and the Maoist party in the bottom. But there are 4 obvious obstacles or things we need to consider. The population, of course, we need to build confidence to them. And that was a very important. We have to be out there, talk with the people. It was forbidden for a patrol to drive through a village without stopping for coffee and talk with the people. So this is so important. We are there to serve them. UN logistics. Normally this doesn't function before after 9 to 12 months, and I'll show you why afterwards. Violations. How do we stop violations or stop them from even occurring? We need to have an inspection regime. Firstly, we have to be physically present on the ground, and you need to take some risks, and in this case I asked for force protection from the both armies. So we didn't have any force protection team. It was up to the 2 armies to see to our welfare. In addition, we inspected every unit every month down to company level. And that's a great job. It was 490 formations in the Nepal army. Then we need to have conflict resolution mechanism. They were on 3 levels: technical level, sector level, which is the 5 regions of Nepal, and then the committee level. And I think then we ended up there fairly successfully. The elections went very well on the 14th of April last year, with big participation and a lot of females for the first time. Joint Monitoring Coordination Committee, it is here given from the text why it was so and who was there and why they were selected. They should reach their decisions by consensus, and these are the 3 main things they do through their work. This was even established before the Security Council resolution and started to function before Christmas in 2006. Let me just say here, if you go to this thing, which I think is a must, to involve the people, you need to have some experience. I was lucky because I was the first one to develop this system in Sudan in 2002. You must have good working relations, trust and confidence. You need to go and drink whiskey and beer with them if they do so. If not, you take coffee or tea. It all depends on where you are. Correct agenda setting. When we had the first meeting, you can see the staring across the table. I was at the far end and my other members at the other end. It was like lightning. And then, of course, you don't start with the biggest problem. You start with simple things. You give it a lot of time, so you have a good solution and you can agree upon. So in the beginning, we were discussing very simple problems for 4 hours, and we only solved 1 case in the first meeting. The last meeting, number 80, we did 6 very difficult cases in 45 minutes, because we had learned to know each other. And the main thing by having these representatives, let's say the generals from both armies, after the meeting they went out and gave directions to their army. You must know that even a 12-page agreement, which is very simple to me as a non-native speaker of English, to them out there, it takes some time to understand. So you need to instruct them. You must sink in, and there will always be violations in the beginning. And we made 2 or 3 other agreements. For example, control of unexploded ordnance and how to do away with that, because that was a lot. The joint monitoring teams, 10 of them we had in Nepal, they were the tools for this committee, and they were dispatched 2 per sector or region in Nepal. And here you see, and that was a tremendous signal, I can tell you, to the Nepalese local population that has been harassed by the police, the 2 armies, for 10 years, to see them work together and drive around in the same car, discussing and solving problems locally. This is what they did. It's taken out of the operational order. Of course, for these 2 activities, there is no UN budget. And what do you do then? Okay, you call your minister back in Norway and tell him to send X millions, otherwise I will go back. Even if they pay the drivers 40,000 rupees a month on a contract, they cannot pay a general $300 a month, because he has to be away from his work, drive around, and all these things. So when I stopped this mission in Nuba, it was handed over to the UN, and they couldn't go on like we did, as I just mentioned. And that's a pity. Somebody has to do something about this. Hope there is an authorized person in this room. So what about these teams? The one to the left is a lieutenant colonel in the Nepal army. In the middle is a small Rai battalion commander in the Maoist army, and then an ugly Norwegian. They worked together like this more than 1 year. Here are the routines they did, and also contact to other UN organizations. We build up a tremendous database on all communities, down to community level, all the 75 districts, with names, information that we shared with the rest of the UN family, because this team were out there asking, do you have water, do you have school, so on, so on. And that helped also the other UN organizations to push in and do the right priorities, even if they are very hard to work with, some of them. Then they did crisis management, investigations of violations, conflict management on local level, and this about UXOs, improvised explosive devices, and remnants of war. There was a lot of this that had to be taken care of. And giving information. Always giving information on what they are doing. Then I also got another slot of money from the same minister, so we could do something we call peace promotion support packages. And information and contact to the civilians through the network which I just mentioned. And the only reason to have 2 levels of headquarters here was to support these people. They are really doing the job on the ground, showing the flag and so on. I will concentrate very briefly on the build-up phase, because after, when you have everything in stock, the rest is more or less routine. And as you see, we were not in uniform because this was a mission under DPA, and the parties had insisted we shouldn't wear uniforms. No problem. The UN has nice equipment. So this is my defined tasks for the 4, let's say, periods. And the 3 first ones are extremely important, and that is to get control of the 2 armies and say that they live after the conditions in the agreement. And this you need to do very quickly. And the UN system is not geared for that. It takes 9 to 12 months to get a budget or something on the ground. So do something about that. The third step is very important, because firstly we went in and registered every on database with UNDP, very professional job, every Maoist soldier. We took them raw, 32,500. It was, of course, a lot of bluffers, far too many. But then we did the verification, as you see, in the second step. And we come back to that. So, here, the Maoists had operated spread all over the country, not in big formations, only on occasions when they did real attacks, for example, with 6 battalions in Beni on March 2006. Then they gathered a lot of troops, took all the weapons, 3,500, put them in action, hold the area, and then went back. And mainly they come from the hilly area, but the result was to put them in the lowland, except for Rolpa, or Kailali, as it's called. And that was not a good situation, because it was jungle, a lot of diseases, not good water, and so on, snakes, scorpions, everything was there, but they have to build it themselves from scratch, and that was impressive. And the money they should get from the government didn't arrive, or it arrived too late, but I managed. And I think to get them in together in full formations like this on a common task to build up their camps was very good for the situation, and it stabilized. But of course they also demand a lot from a military commander. It is different to be a divisional commander than to be a manager and build up a camp for 5,000 people. It's different. So this is the result. And you see 3,475 weapons we got in. That was exactly the same number as was reported by the Nepal army, police, and armed police force that was stolen from them. So we could very easily identify that the weapons were in. Some were imported, and here you see the final results also from the cantoning of the Maoist army. The Nepal army is like a territorial army, very much like the National Guard in my country, where there was one division in each of the 5 regions, plus one extra division then in the valley around Kathmandu. And this is reinforced on this picture because there was a battalion or an independent company co-located with the civilian authorities in each district, 75. Then there was also something very unique with this mission. We had Gurkhas, ex-servicemen of the Indian Army, Gurkha regiments. As we had very few resources, we recruited 107 of them, put them together with 35 monitors, and then we could start to operate. So let me tell you what they were supposed to do. And this was a proposal coming from the 2 parties.
One minute, if you would.
1 minute?
Only 1. I'll give you 2. I'm feeling generous.
Yeah. Okay. So how we trained the Gurkhas after selection out of 450. We took 107. After training, we said you have to be in the Maoist camps by the 15th. And how they got there, I don't know. But when I deployed my monitors the day after, we could then start to operate on these bases. The Gurkhas set up everything. We had 7 cars stolen from the UNDP. We didn't have communication. We rented helicopters with the Norwegian money. That's how we operated the first days. And we were hanging by the fingernails because told Mr. Martin, you have to take a risk. I think it will go well. But to have a presence on the ground and freeze it even with 2 monitors in each division is very important. And this is how it looked like. The technical installation, the storage thing inside the Maoist camp. And here we had monitoring on all the weapons, 24/7 alarm on the doors and all these things. We had to negotiate that very specifically for the parties to accept it. And as you see, here is the site inside the Maoist Army Division headquarters. And it was stored like this. So we knew exactly everything was on data. Why was it important to get the Maoists under control and also the army? Because that opened up for the political process so the Maoist party could be a part of the interim government. Yeah. So thank you, Norway and United Kingdom, for financing the first 6 months here. Yeah. There is a few more, but I can stop here.
Perhaps when in the discussion, you can,
Yeah.
if necessary, we can refer to...
This is why the UN system doesn't work. DFS is the Department for Field Support, which has become even more bureaucratic. But here is what's happening. ACABQ, Advisory Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Questions. They should be an undertakers bureau because they cut the budget with 50%. Fifth committee, part of the General Assembly gives the sanction. Then the Secretary General has a tasking order, and then it goes for to assess contributions, personnel, and these things. And here we are, 9 months. But let me also mention, we only have one UN and we have to take care of it, all of us.
We do.
How do we discuss complaints? Everybody could complain. It went into my headquarters, the Chief Intelligence Officer, as I will call him, staffed it, wrote up a tasking order to one of the sector that made the investigation. The findings were presented with evidence and everything for the JMCC, and they took the decision if this was a violation or not. And we then informed if there was a non-violation. To follow up this, my two counterparts from each army took the results and initiated that in. We didn't publish it as the human rights people do, because...
And now I really am going to call time on you.
Yeah.
I would love us to come back to your magnificent picture of the UN system.
Yeah.
And its functioning, and perhaps we could that could frame part of our discussion. But General, if I may, I'm going
I'm sorry I overstepped my time.